the theme, the global theme, as I mentioned earlier, freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights. Where do you see, Karima, the critical intersections between freedom of expression, media freedom, and all other human rights?
Thank you, and I need to start by a thank you message to Honourable Minister YB Fahmi for hosting us here and for the partnership. I think it is groundbreaking, and you were always part of the annual meeting that we held to celebrate this very important day. But having you today is definitely meaningful, and I want to thank our partners for continuing this conversation and carrying it over until we see some real impact and change happen. So just allow me this, and I want to thank all the participants for joining the UN in celebrating today, and also in really reflecting and thinking. And the theme is not a coincidence. I think choosing a theme where we're talking about building a future of rights, it is because human rights are under threat globally. We are seeing every single day human rights being under attack. We are seeing a lot of signals that have to make us worry about the future of the freedom as a concept, and the freedom of expression, and the freedom of the press in particular. I want to definitely pay a tribute to the 68 journalists who were killed in 2022. And that number is on the rise, and it's about 50% more than the year before. And it is something that is worrisome, and we need to think about that. I also pay tribute to those that are in detention. The numbers are record high everywhere. And this is something we need to keep in mind. It is not normal that every 5 days a journalist loses their life. So please, let's remember this as we talk about rights. And in the intersection, definitely, I mean, if we're talking about the concept of freedom, which is, again, has to be linked to the concept of responsibility, right? So it is not about just being free, but be free to express, be free to disagree, be free to bring the information and focus on whatever topic, but also be responsible in doing so. And I think it's this duality that makes this particular human right one of the most complex ones, I believe. So perhaps as a and freedom of press just allows a lot of things to happen. It allows information to circulate, it allows dialogue, it allows debates, it allows differences, but also similarities to be built, and it allows public opinion to be formed. And that is very important, because when the narrative is informed well by responsible journalism, but also free journalism, that I think gives a lot of potential in terms of participation and engagement. And it's simply democracy, and I think Malaysia has embraced the values of democracy, and it's about now instilling them and bringing them, across the board on all topics. I'll stop here perhaps and engage.
Okay, we'll come back to that, because you raised a number of issues that I think we can unpack and elaborate during our discussion. Eva, I want to come to you. I'm glad that the Embassy of the Netherlands is here, because the Netherlands is co-chair of the Media Freedom Coalition. It has been for the past couple of years, along with Canada. Folks, if a tidbit, ooh, that was a nasty little thing. Okay, all right. Let's keep talking, push through the technical difficulties. So just wanted to share with you about the Media Freedom Coalition. So it was formed at the Global Conference for Media Freedom back in 2019. And if I understand correctly, I think all right, here we go. Crisis averted. All right, just wanted to say that former Minister YB Gobind Singh was at that conference where the Media Freedom Coalition was first formed. So maybe Eva can share a little bit about what the commitments are. The Netherlands as a co-chair, what are the commitments when it comes to advocating for media freedom, for the safety of journalists, as we heard with that horrific statistic that Karima just shared?
Your mic. Oh, wait, it's working now. Okay, great. Well, before I answer that question, Melisa, thank you so much. I would also like to welcome each and everyone here in the meeting room, joining physically or online to commemorate World Press Freedom Day and join us in, even emphasizing the importance of freedom of expression and freedom of press. And I would also like to echo what Karima just said about YB Fahmi being here with us today, and I can only applaud that and looking forward to co-organizing this event again next year with you. So when it comes to the to the Media Freedom Coalition, so it was formed in 2019, and I think already in 2019 we saw a global decline in press freedom. And we really felt we needed to step up our efforts as governments, but also as journalists worldwide to promote freedom of press. So right now the coalition covers some 50 countries globally from all 6 continents, and you'll see that those 50 countries are working together both at a government level, using their diplomatic networks to really advocate freedom of press, also supporting individual cases sometimes where journalists are being prosecuted, but also hosting forums, pushing for legal reforms, everything that's needed on a global level to really strengthen the freedom of expression and the freedom of press. So the Netherlands, we've been co-chairing since 2 years, so 2021. This group, and we've really said, okay, we would really like to support technically 3 Ps. So it's to prevent, to protect, and to prosecute as the main anchors to support freedom of expression and support journalists worldwide. So thirdly, it's about preventing attacks on journalists. And as Karima mentioned, when every 5 days a journalist is being murdered, a lot more needs to be done there. Secondly is protecting the journalists, which can be done in many ways. Even embassies sometimes step in there. But also the prosecution of perpetrators, obviously. So particularly the issue of impunity and perpetration and accountability has been very high on our agenda. Also, as accountability is the ultimate form of prevention in the end. During our presidency or our co-chairmanship, we've also given special attention to the role of women in press, as we see that both online and offline, women tend to be more often targeted with hate speech, with discrimination, and are being silenced. So we try to see what we can also do specifically to support female journalists and media workers in their work.
All right, thank you for that. Gender-based violence, definitely an issue that really needs to be addressed. Vatsala, that was the global stage, but what about the Malaysian context? How would you respond to some of the challenges that Eva had raised, the issues that Eva had raised about advocating for press freedom and the safety of journalists? Where do you think are the critical risks when it comes to media freedom in a Malaysian context?
Thank you, and again, greetings to all. Thank you, YB Fahmi, for being here, Eva, Karima. It's always great to have this continued collaboration, and thank you all for joining us this morning too. You know, if you had asked me that question a year ago, my response would probably be slightly different. Oh. I think what we need to acknowledge is that Malaysia is really a melting pot of diversity. The diversity should not at any point be threatened, right, or compromised, and we really need to uphold this diversity. And within this ecosystem is where media fit in. What is the role of media in promoting our rights, in making sure that they play the role as the fourth estate in pushing forward a democratic nation? And obviously, media, not just globally, but also in Malaysia, do face heightened risks at times. We are at 73 in terms of the RSF Global Index, right, on press freedom. The 73 is very, very significant for us because it shows, in comparison, for example, with our neighboring countries, we are doing much better. But in comparison with Norway, which is, I think, at number 1, or in comparison with Timor-Leste, a tiny country here in Southeast Asia, which is at number 10, we're still far behind. And the reason why we are far behind is we continue to experience challenges when it comes to the mere survival of the media as it is. The legacy media is experiencing economic threats. Yeah, and economic threats, if we look at the changing dynamics of the economic ecosystems globally, what more in Malaysia, this could be purely because we need to rethink the current business models of media, which are evolving, but they're also coming under threat because of the role of social media platforms. We've got our friends from Google here and a conversation to be taken further, but that's contributing to how media faces itself, right? Now, economic threats, of course, also contributes to not just the survival of the media, the legacy media, but also the survival of the media workers, the journalists themselves. Labor issues are real, right? Pay gaps are existing. Social benefits are still limited. So that's continuing threat. And of course, with the economic threat, it is going to impact the quality as well of the content that we get from our media now, especially news media. So on one hand, we have more responsible reporting, more ethical reporting happening, but at the other hand, the threats contribute to some level of censorship as well. Then the bigger picture, and I think the legal landscape plays a huge role. The laws as we have now are not necessarily aimed at protecting the rights of media, right, or media freedom. The laws we have, unfortunately, YB, are working towards restricting our freedom of expression. I don't need to list the laws. I think the roundtables later will have a long conversation. So these threats are impacting our trust. And more people are relying on different digital platforms, social media. Every morning I get up, I get a series of WhatsApp messages from my friend groups, my family groups, with news, real news, convincing news. And these are reasons why disinformation continues to proliferate. And we are also seeing now a rise in terms of how these hate speech is also taking space within the media landscape. All these are threats, but these are not just monumental threats. I think there are many ways of how later, as we continue our discussion, we can figure out solutions to this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I completely, that resonates with me because I don't know about you, all the media practitioners in the room, I think we wear two hats, one as journalists, the other as fact checkers for our family WhatsApp misinformation that they send us, right? Okay, I want to follow up with a question to YB Fahmi. You mentioned during the recent National Journalist Day, Hawana, you made some comments in which you said that you expressed a commitment to, if I may quote you, uplift the dignity of journalists. Can I get you to elaborate? What exactly are you committing to when you say that you want to promote, or the ministry wants to promote freedom of expression and media freedom in Malaysia?
Yeah, thank you. That's a fantastic question, and I want to just check. Can I see how many here are from Malaysian media organisations? Boleh angkat tangan?
Ada Syarat Kuta.
Berapa ramai
ada
dari
Ian.
media arus perdana ataupun online di Malaysia? How many of you are chief editors? Chief editors of your respective organisation. How many of you are owners of your media organisation? So I think we need to have the owners here as well, yeah, and the chief editors as well. It's celebrating World Press Freedom Day, I think a minister is here holding this event in a ministry complex, yeah, which has never been done before. I think local Malaysian media should take that as an important signal. How can we have a government which aspires to uplift the dignity of journalists, and yet an important landmark historic event such as today, which has never been done before, we see, I mean, that in itself says something. Are they online?
Well,
I don't know.
I hope they're online. They better be online.
No,
Okay,
no.
they better be online.
maybe they're online. Maybe they're online. But I'm sure they will get the message later.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is, one of the biggest problems faced by media in Malaysia is not threat of bodily harm or physical harm. There's some, we have received reports. I have, as an ordinary backbencher before this, even heard problems faced by journalists, including sexual harassment or other kind of verbal abuse. These kind of things happen. But when we say uplifting the dignity of journalists and journalism, it's particularly within the context of the challenges faced by the media today. In the last, I reckon I was trying to look through some of the numbers. In the last 7 years, approximately almost 2,000 journalists lost their jobs. Almost 2,000, yeah, in the last 7 years in Malaysia. And the highest number happened in about 2019, when 927 journalists were retrenched. Sorry, between 2015 and 2022, 2,200 journalists lost their jobs.
Wow.
Yeah? So a lot of this is driven by economic pressures. And I'm very heartened to hear that Google is here. I wish that Meta and TikTok are also here. These are challenges faced by not just Malaysia, but many countries in the world. And Melisa, you put it very aptly that oftentimes, you know, journalists are points of reference for family members to ask, is this real news or not? And within that context, to me, the most important aspect is ethical journalism. And it's that fight between getting it first and getting it right. And I think in the context of Malaysia, for the government, given that we have risen 40 places to the 73rd position, the highest ever that Malaysia has ever gotten, I think, bodes well, but that should not be you know, an occasion for us to rest on our laurels. We have to work very hard. And that's why one of the commitments that I have given after the Hawana event was to address economic pressures faced by media organizations and journalists. If there's a suspicion that in the fight and quest to get more eyeballs, some may want to move towards a more clickbaity, you know, rather than a more, this is the challenge, this is the question, right? So, for example, yesterday, there was a member of parliament, you know, there was this fracas in parliament about bakute. It's not about bakute at all. That was, if you look at the question raised by the first MP, it was listing out a set of food items and then asking what is the government doing to avoid Malaysian food from being claimed by other countries as being theirs. You know, so that was the question. Yet in a lot of reporting, it was sensational, it was, you know, okay, we want to get more people to view our content on our TikTok account. So we can't talk about dignity, we can't talk about, without talking about livelihood, without also talking about ethical journalism.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, but what exactly do you mean by wanting to address the economic pressures on media organizations? How would you do that?
So actually, we've done a number of firsts, yeah, with this administration, particularly my being in this role. Recently, in the last few months, we've engaged with senior editors, chief editors, media owners to engage in constructive dialogue about the kind of pressures that they are facing. The fact of the matter is, in the last, some media organizations have seen their revenue plummet, yeah, falling off a cliff. There are some that have come to me and said, in the last few years, they've seen their revenue reduced by 75%. We've had organizations that have to choose whether to shift completely online. And mind you, we are still discussing press and even, for example, when it comes to Akta Bernama on our national news agency, the law still says explicitly Surat Khabar. Yeah? So these are anachronistic terms, I feel, because a lot of organizations no longer literally work with the press. And of course, now we understand it means more than that. So what we've been doing is trying to understand how other countries are dealing with this problem, economic problem. And I mentioned Google, Meta, and TikTok. And we're trying to look at perhaps some kind of model to bring some of the ADEX back. This is the most serious threat to media organizations in Malaysia today. Yeah? The loss of revenue. So that's why at the end of Hawana, I mentioned that I've raised it with the Prime Minister. I've spoken with a lot of the media organizations, and this is something that we intend to pursue. You can't have press if there's no money to run a press.
Right.
And you can't rely on government, because then, you know, even the question of media council, why should you take money from the government if you want to be independent, for example? Yeah? But to get things rolling, we could help. But coming back to media organizations, it's very important that media is free and fair.
Right.
So economic matters, yeah? Upholding the dignity involves addressing economic concerns.
YB, you touched on the Media Council. I cannot not ask you about that. When you say, you know, why would you take money from the government if you want to be a truly independent media council? What do you see the role of the government in the Media Council?
We have been discussing this, my deputy and I, along with a pro tem committee, as well as four that have been discussing the Media Council since 2018, 2019, and with the wider community of media organizations. And right now there is we are arriving at a point of agreement where we can bring this matter to cabinet. I can't say more than what we are discussing, because cabinet has not made a decision on the matter. There are options, and I do, as I said, personally as well as professionally, honor the role of free and independent media, what more, Media Council. We have looked at how media councils operate in various jurisdictions. There are best practices that we can adopt, but there are specific challenges in getting it off the ground. So we have to look at, while we have the aspiration, we have the law that we need to bring to Parliament, we also have to look at how can we make it, how can we run it sustainably? We meaning, you know, I foresee a relatively limited role for government in the Media Council. That media should be, by and large, self-regulated, and the laws are there in case there are any breaches of the law. But in order to do that, you know, it's good, it's well and good to have a Media Council, but it's incomplete if we don't address the economic concerns raised by media organizations themselves.
Okay.
So it has to be attended to simultaneously. That's our strategy right now.
Wathshlah, would you want to add anything to that as Pro Tem, one of the members of the Pro Tem Council?
I think looking at the Media Council is going to be really critical, because, and you know, especially to address some of the economic concerns, the larger concerns around the existing laws, and for the media's survival itself, right? One of the push, and in fact recommendation from the Pro Tem Committee had been, how do we ensure self-regulation, one, right, that is representative of the industry as well as the, putting the public's interests at the forefront. The second thing has, of course, been the question of independence. I think we've really looked at some very critical models, especially from Indonesia, in terms, how do we balance the need to engage with the government, at the same time ensure that the self-regulation is not undermined to a large extent or challenged with the government's presence in the Media Council. So there is a lot of space, I think, for discussion in that. Because the initial recommendation from the Pro Tem Committee was a very, very interesting model that took after Indonesia and South Africa, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's going to be more discussion on this later today, so let's wait for that session to expand further on this. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask the floor, any questions coming from the floor? I know someone will run a mic to you if you do have a question. Just put your hand up high in the sky. Anyone? Any questions? Yes, I see two. Can we run a mic to the gentleman, please? Why don't I run my mic, since I think I stole yours? Okay. Yes, sir. Could you introduce yourself?
All right. Thank you, Honorable Minister. My name is Siva Balan. I'm representing, or rather, I'm from the Information Department under the Ministry of Communication and Digital. Respected Minister, respected panel members, I've got a question actually, but I've been a journalist all my life. I started off as a journalist in Bernama, and now I'm the Director of Media for the Information Department. We spoke, panel members, some of us spoke about the need to abolish so-called draconian laws, i.e. Printing Press and Publication Act, etc., etc. At the same time, we have fake news, we have hate speech. My question is simple. How do you police, or let me rephrase this, how do you manage fake news, hate speech without all these acts, without all these laws? How do you reconcile, respected panel members? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, do you want to take another question, or do you want to answer through? Okay.
Answer quickly. A lot of it comes down to literacy. Right now, a lot of people get information not from the regular press anymore, literal physical press, not from newspapers. Newspapers appear to be anachronistic. They're like, you read the papers and it's actually a record of yesterday's news, right? Whereas news is digital now, a lot of it. So a lot of it is about digital literacy. A lot of it is about educating a wide public about how to discern, how to understand, how to assess for themselves whether a piece of news or information that they receive is fake or not. I'll give a very clear example, a very simple example that happened just a few days ago. There were allegations on social media, and a lot of people, mind you, view TikTok as the news, right? Especially a certain age group and below. So there was this whole allegation about Lim Kit Siang, who received a transfership from the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. There were allegations made by political opponents against him that he is a communist, which is absolutely fake and absolutely, you know, it's vile and disgusting, and it is also an affront to the institution of the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. And yet, how do you address these kind of, it's not press, but for some people, they see it as this is a part of the news, you know, because for them, it's like, if you were, I'll give an example. If you were to open the papers, you've got the news, you've got editorials, you've got the funnies, right? So when people look at TikTok, do people look at TikTok like we used to look at newspapers? Like some part of it is real, some part of it is paid for, some part of it is, you know, like funnies, right? So how do you help an audience to discern? And this is where events such as World Press Freedom Day, organizations including Google, a lot of the media platforms can help. And initially, I've been called out for being hard on particularly TikTok, but I have to say, since December to today, TikTok has been very cooperative, not in a, you know, like, not in a, they have been very helpful trying to help us understand that just like the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister says, you fight hujah politik dengan hujah politik. So TikTok has reiterated the same thing, but they have gone further by going down to the ground to help with modules on digital literacy. So I think the law is the law, but we need to make sure that the populace, particularly a broader segment of society that have a different perspective of what news is, what the press is today, understand their role, the press, and this field called news and media.
Right. Well, the law is the law, but are there any efforts to reform the law? To what? Reform the law, the draconian laws as mentioned.
Right now, not as yet. We will assess the matter from time to time. This is the diplomatic answer.
Okay, it's a long game. We'll wait. We'll come back to that. We'll circle back in next year's World Press Freedom Day event. I saw a hand at the back there. Can we run a mic, please? Thank you.
Yes, good morning. My name's Andrew Koo.
Good morning, Andrew.
Hi. I wasn't planning to ask any questions, but when the Honourable Minister talked about the Press Council and independence and government money, it evoked some appalling sort of response. And I just want to push back to the Honourable Minister. I mean, I think we have to rebut this idea that just because you take government money, you are controlled by the government. Because it's not the government's money in the first place. It's the people's money. It's the rakyat's money. It's taxpayers' money. The government is merely, in a sense...
You can clap, you can clap.
An arbiter of where it goes. But at the end of the day, it's the people's money, right? I mean, it's very interesting. You go to California and you build highways, the platform that says,
right, your
tax dollars at work. It's your money. So if the people want a press council, can the government fund the press council, give them a block allocation and say, this is the money, then whatever you want to do it, how you want to spend with it, you go ahead and do it yourself. We will not interfere in how you spend the money. That is how governments in other parts of the world work. And why can't we do it here in Malaysia?
Thank you, Andrew.
Why do we have to perpetuate this myth that everything is the government's money? Because if you take that analogy to its full conclusion, everything is controlled by the government. The government controls the monarchy, the government controls...
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for the comment.
I think we have to disabuse ourselves of that notion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to give an opportunity for you to respond if you want to, but I also am going to open the floor again for more questions. YB, would you like to respond, or shall I take another question?
Thank you, Andrew. We'll take that under advisement.
All right. Can we get another question on the stage left? Thanks.
Hi everyone, hi YB Fahmi. I'm a former journalist and news anchor from government agency, Bernama. So I would like to follow the question just now. So I think one of the ways is to consider to transforming the government media agency into public service media. Do you think this is possible in our unity government?
Sorry, could I get you to repeat that? So you mean, could you repeat what you mean by that? Meaning you want a public service organization. Do I understand correctly?
Can we change our government media to public service media?
Okay. Are you referring to like the BBC model?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you for your question. Does anyone want to respond from both a local perspective and maybe international perspective, if necessary?
From the administration's perspective, there are certain things that we're trying to do right now to bring changes to RTM. So that is slowly happening. It takes a bit of time. But also for Bernama, inshallah soon we will have a new board. And then we will wait for the board, the Lembaga Pengelola, to look at how it is functioning and perhaps propose some things that we can do to make it better.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been it's just 6 months in. There was a lot of I think trying to learn and understand what every try to visit every nook and cranny. So it'll take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I often forget it's 7 months. I've lost track of time. It's June. So yeah, it's 7 months, isn't it? Yes, okay. All right, so we've been talking a lot on the local perspective, local context. I do want to kind of zoom out and look at the international perspective, because I think sometimes that provides us with a little bit of a nuance in the conversation. Karima and Eva, I'm going to come to the both of you for an international perspective. Karima first. Karina first. May I get you to share with us what you think the role of the UN is when it comes to promoting freedom of expression and media freedom, particularly in the ways in which we can leverage some of the international standards and mechanisms?
Thank you. Let me just say something. The role of the UN starts here. I think when the UN succeeds in partnering and bringing together the key stakeholders to address some of the very sensitive, fundamental issues, that's already, a success. And that's impact. Of course, what we would like to see is this conversation to actually move forward and continue to be constructive and continue to take in all the different perspectives. And that, I think, is something we should be very proud of today, of being able to really kind of get this conversation going. Now, with reference to, again, the agenda of the UN is the normative agenda, is whatever our member states have agreed to. It's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which celebrates its 75th anniversary this year. It is all the resolutions that member states have been part of. And some of them are legally binding, and some of them are not legally binding. But they have equal importance. When you have a General Assembly resolution, that means that 193 countries have agreed to something, whether it's a principle, it's an action, it's a way forward. We're surrounded by these colorful boxes and the SDGs, and the SDGs for us are a human rights framework for a development agenda. SDGs, every one of them, is about human rights. It's about freedom. Freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom from need, freedom from vulnerability. And if you take 16, SDG 16, wherever it's hidden, it's one that is very special because it is about institutions, it's about transparency, it's about good governance, it's about responsibility, and it's about also the duty of care. And I think this is what was happening in the first segment of this panel, is what duty of care does the government have as an institution with its many institutions, whether we're talking the legislative, and independence definitely is there, but we talk about the independence of the judiciary. But that's also funded, and I think the de-link between where the money comes from and what the institution's role is very important. And that duty of care, when you look at SDG 16, and if I remember where SDG 16, target 16.10, is about protecting fundamental freedoms, and it's about ensuring access to information. And that one target Malaysia is committed to and is doing definitely a lot to advance it. So SDGs can be a framework to bring these issues back, but you definitely have all the other resolutions that Malaysia is party to. And you know, the challenge always, and that's not to Malaysia only, the challenge is how do you make sure that the commitments that Malaysia sitting in Geneva, New York, Nairobi, Vienna, any of the UN headquarters, agreeing to resolutions, being party, sometimes sponsoring resolutions, brings that back home and domesticates it and makes it actually part of the legal framework of the country. And that's a challenge everywhere. But that's where the UN comes in. And we come in with the capacity building, the sharing of experiences, as was mentioned by YB Minister, bring us those success stories of where you managed to address the issue of the future of jobs. Because the future of jobs are definitely linked to what you're saying. If it's going to be about online and about virtual and about digital, then going digital has implications for people's lives. And that's linked to the just transition and to making sure that everything that is done is people-centered. And that makes sure dignity is respected, freedoms are respected, and actually democracy is advanced.
Thank you. What about you, Eva? Is there anything you'd like to add to that, particularly in how Malaysia might be able to bolster some of the diversity, plurality within the media space here?
I think on the one hand, certain points have already been made, especially when it comes to the funding for independent journalism, which is of course at the core of plurality. Especially also investigative journalism. We know it's costly, but it's so vital to have reliable, independent, fact-based information out there. So also voters can make objective decisions and well-informed decisions. And I think that also links back to what we started with this morning, where freedom of expression and freedom of press is at the core of all other liberties, as also Karima already mentioned. So that's one area. Another area would be also self-censorship that we see also in Malaysia, where journalists and media workers sometimes already restrict themselves nowadays to not really write the full story. And I'm hopeful that also with Prime Minister Anwar not too long ago also expressing the need he sees for media to be out there, to be critical, and also to a certain extent also scrutinize the government is an important signal. And I really hope that also following YB's comments that, you know, it might lead to reforms. Yeah. But also platforms. We also need different platforms where people can meet and exchange views and you know, get access to different points and different perspectives. That exchange could also help, I guess, support diversity and plurality. And then maybe lastly, also looking back specifically also at the role of women. I think it's a global challenge, but also here in Malaysia, women are particularly vulnerable, and we could look also at their role and how we can support them further and make sure that they are not harassed online, sexually, or in another way.
Okay, thank you, Eva. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Is your question going to be the lucky question that we take from the floor? Yes, we have one in the aisle. Can we get a mic to the gentleman? So we'll take one last question from the floor. Sir, you are the lucky winner of the last question. Okay. Good morning.
Selamat pagi kepada YB Fahmi and all the panelists. Actually, I have a question. Actually, it's not really a question. Just want to ask opinion from YB on this violence against these minority groups in what I call it minorities in Malaysia. For me, the minorities actually includes LGBT groups. Of course, when we talk about this press freedom or freedom of expressions, all of us have freedom to express ourselves. Okay. For example, like different people actually would tend to look from different perspectives. For example, like if you look from Muslim or Islam perspective, of course, this LGBT have different, what you call it, you have different perceptions. But if you look from this human right perspective, then you might have different judgment.
Okay.
So maybe can YB boleh share sikit ke?
So
Thank you.
the question is
Violence against
minorities.
Yeah,
And your name is,
minorities.
sir?
I'm Lee from University Malaysia Sabah.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
question. All right, that was a specific question directed to the minister. Any comment?
Yeah, the law is very clear that that anyone, if anyone threatens, I mean, or physically harms another person, for whatever reason, be it ideology, be it for profit, be it for whatever reason, that is a breach of the law. So there are automatic safeguards, and right now those laws are applicable. But if you have a particular ideology, and I don't mean to only address one segment, but across the board. For example, there are people who might, there are different, if we talk about religion, for example, within Islam, yeah? So you might have different interpretations, and there are within the group itself, within the Muslim community, there are also ways and means to look at difference and whether to accept or not. So, for example, if ajaran sesat, yeah, so there are certain things that can be done by law, but at the same time, there are certain things that are also done. Okay, it's a complicated matter. It's not something that I can answer fully in a few minutes, but rest assured that if anyone feels physically threatened by any other person, lodge a police report, yeah? and then the law will protect you. So this is applicable across the board. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever perhaps ideology or political leaning you might have, yeah. So the law is applicable and to all, inshallah.
All right, thank you, YB. All right, we're wrapping up the session now, and I want to get thoughts, conclusions from the panelists, your final thoughts for this session. Wathshlah, may I begin with you? You know, what's the message that you want to leave the audience with, and what did you hope to achieve, not just from this session, but from the whole day?
Thank you, Melisa, and thank you everyone for the amazing questions. And we'll have to have another session next year, I think, to discuss and explore these issues that are emerging and being raised in discussion. I think the intention of today's forum, you know, all of you would have received a concept note, but ideally what we wanted to do is bring together different stakeholders and anchor the conversation in terms of understanding the emerging trends when it comes to freedom of expression and media freedom. That's the key thing. I think the fact that we have different stakeholders here would carry forward the conversation. I think the second thing that's really critical for us is not just talk. We just don't want to have a talk show, but really something more practical, which is looking at solution. We've been talking, I think, for decades now. With this current government, we hope we are moving forward in terms of thinking through progressive solutions, leaving behind a lot of baggages that we have inherited. And this space is critical. It's a beginning, right? And having all voices being heard, and having all voices influence the solution and recommendation to the state is going to be critical. And YB will be coming to you and the ministry with the recommendations from the forum by the end of today. Maybe we'll be compiling everything by end of today, and having further conversation on the recommendations and possible solutions. So those are practical reasons for us to be here.
Enough talk, it's time for action now. Eva, what about you?
Thank you. Well, of course, first of all, I also really look forward to the recommendations, and especially on the closed forum parts in the afternoon. I think the program as a whole is very interesting that we have today with the open sessions, the movie, and then the afternoon, and it's quite comprehensive. other than that, following the discussion that we just had, I was thinking that for the government of the Netherlands, freedom of expression and freedom of press has been on our international human rights agenda for decades now. It's, we really try to play a role there. That might be different for other governments throughout the world. So I thought I might also use this opportunity to also call upon my colleague diplomats who are in the room here today, and to see if, for those of them even with limited capacity, maybe they can use the opportunity today during lunch to reach out to other journalists and at least invite one journalist out for lunch one day, and make it also have a lunch with your journalist day today, so we can collaborate more and see how also as an international diplomatic community we can play an even more supportive role to those who need it.
I know a lot of journalists who won't turn down a free meal, myself included. Okay, so last concluding thoughts from you, Karima.
Thank you, and again, I absolutely agree that that talking is very, very good, and I think it does break the barriers that sometimes we see erected between different stakeholders, and I think that it is our responsibility to make sure that dialogue continues, and hopefully build some kind of compact where the roles are clearer and the responsibilities also. I mean, you want to have media that somehow commits to working in ethical, responsible, accountable way. And at the same time, working within an ecosystem that enables it to be free, enables it to be dignified, enables it to be protected. And I think it's really that relationship, you know, that needs to be worked out, and we hope that some of the recommendations are action-oriented enough, so that next year when we meet again on the 3rd of May or a bit later like this year, we are taking stock of some of the things that have changed. And I think this government brings, brings hope, brings a lot of potential for change. Right. Everybody's expecting, right? But I think everybody is believing also. And that belief needs to be nurtured by delivery and by this commitment to really, uphold human rights, make them upfront. And when we start by upholding human rights, the rest follows. That would be my closing.
Thank you so much. YB, your final thoughts and what you expect to get out of today's forum.
I look forward to perhaps listening more, finding out different perspectives and perhaps some ideas, contrasting ideas, and perhaps looking at how we can collaborate, we can work together, not only to ensure and enshrine freedom of expression, uplift and uphold the dignity of journalists and a free press, free media, but at the same time really look at strengthening ethical journalism. I think this is a going concern. Lastly, inshallah, we can collaborate further. I look forward to further engagements and collaborations. In fact, am I the first minister who's invited CIJ? No, before this.
Yes. YB Gobin.
We worked with the Minister of Law
No,
before.
Oh, okay.
But for the Ministry of Communications.
Of Communications, yes.
Yeah, I think I'm the first one, yeah, to invite CIJ. But we want to hear, yeah, and of course all of this is done without prejudice, yeah, and this is important because the government will need to assess all these perspectives and find a way forward. So lastly, thank you so much for coming to IPTA. This is just a PSA. If you wish to conduct any events here, Mr. Kumaran is somewhere around. He's the director of IPTA. Please get in touch. We'll find a favorable fee. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And folks, that's it for this session. Round of applause for our panelists. If I could get the panelists to remain on stage very quickly, we've got some tokens of appreciation, of which I will present to you for your participation. So let's begin with Minister. Is this okay? being on the panel.